welcome to my channel Amoeba Savant. My name is Nalinne Jones and we are reading the Brothers Karamazov, Book 3, Chapter 2. Please subscribe. Reeking Lizaveta. The circumstances of this childbirth confirmed an unsavory and revolting suspicion that Gregory had had ever since a certain incident. Reeking Lizaveta was a tiny creature, just a teeny-weeny thing of 4.5 feet, as many of the old women around the church tearfully described her after her death. At 20, she had a round, rosy, healthy face, but it was the face of an idiot. Her eyes, although gentle enough, had a peculiar heavy stare that made an unpleasant impression. Winter and summer, she went around barefoot, wearing only a hemp smock. Sounds like my kind of outfit. Her hair, which was very thick, almost black and curly as lamb's wool, looked like some huge, strange hat sitting on her head, a dusty, muddy hat with leaves, small twigs, and wood shavings sticking out of it, for she often slept on the ground. Her father was a former shopkeeper who had lost all his money and, homeless and sickly, had taken to drink. His name was Ilya, and for many years he lived with a family of well-to-do shopkeepers, working for them as a sort of handyman. As for Lizaveta's mother, she had been dead for quite some time. Always in poor health and irritable, Ilya would beat Lizaveta mercilessly whenever she came home, and so she went home very seldom. She slept outside and the townsfolk fed her, believing her to be a holy fool. Ilya himself, his employers, and various kind-hearted townspeople, mostly local merchants, often tried to make Lizaveta dress more decently. They gave her other clothes, and in winter they would dress her in a sheepskin coat and a pair of boots. But after meekly allowing them to put these clothes on her without a word of protest, she would usually go to a particular corner somewhere behind the cathedral, pull off all the things that had been given her, leave them there in a heap, and walk away barefoot in just her smock as before. Once, when the newly appointed governor of our province was making a tour of inspection, he paid a surprise to visit our town and was quite outraged when he caught sight of Lizaveta, although they explained to him that she was a holy fool. God's fool or not, he declared, a young girl going around in nothing but a smock was a violation of the standards of decency, and he issued a warning that it must happen no more. But after the governor was gone, Lizaveta was again to be seen around town wearing nothing but her smock, just as before. After her father died, the pious people of the church became even more sentimental about her, since she was now officially an orphan. Indeed, everyone in town seemed to like her, and no one bullied or annoyed her, not even the schoolboys, and our schoolboys are a mischievous lot. She would enter strange houses, and no one would chase her away. Indeed, people always received her kindly and gave her a kopeck or two, but she would take the coin and go straight to an alms box in the church or outside the prison and drop it in. If she was given a bun or a roll, she never failed to give it away to the first child she met, or she would stop some wealthy lady and offer it to her. And, strangely enough, the rich ladies would accept it with great joy. She herself lived on black bread and water, nothing else. She could walk into any big store and wander around amidst expensive things. Even if they had money lying there, the owners never bothered to keep an eye on her, for they knew that they could have left 1,000 rubles in cash and forgotten all about it, and she would not have taken a single kopeck. She seldom went inside a church and either spent her nights on a church porch or climbed over some wattle fence — we still have many wattle fences in town — into a vegetable garden. About once a week she went home, that is, to the house of her late father's employers, and in cold winters she went there to sleep almost every night, either in the entrance hall or in the cowshed. People looking at her wondered how she survived, but she was used to living as she did, and although she was so short, she was very strongly built. Some of our respectable people claimed she lived the way she did out of sheer pride, but that didn't seem to make much sense. She could not pronounce even one word, Now and then she would move her tongue about and produce only a mooing sound, so where was there room for pride in her? Once, quite long ago, on a warm September night, when there was a full moon and it was late by our provincial standards, half a dozen of our gentlemen who had left the club in a rather inebriated state were making their way home through the back gardens. They were walking along a lane bordered by wattled fences, behind which lay the kitchen gardens of the nearby houses. The lane itself led to a little bridge over the long, stinking puddle that is often referred to in these parts as a river. And by one of the wattle fences the merry gang found Lizaveta asleep among the weeds and nettles. The sight of her made the gentlemen laugh uproariously and elicited some extremely crude remarks. Then one of them asked a rather outlandish question. Could anyone regard this animal as a woman? For instance, at this moment could... etc. With haughty disdain, the others decided that it was quite unthinkable. But one disagreed, Fyodor Karamazov, who happened to be among them. He stepped forward and declared that she would very easily be regarded as a woman, that, indeed, she had a certain spice to her, and so on and so forth. It is true that at that time he was particularly anxious to be an amusing companion to the local gentlemen, and while he pretended to be one of them, felt they considered him a flunky. This was soon after he had received the news from Petersburg of his first wife Adelaida's death, and, wearing mourning crepe on his hat, he was drinking and misbehaving scandalously, although to outrage even the most unprincipled rogues in our town. Enough to outrage. The gentlemen burst into loud laughter at Karamazov's surprising statement, and one of them even challenged him to back his words with deeds, while the others went on elaborating on their horror and disgust, although with extraordinary exhilaration. Finally, however, they tired of it and walked off. Later, Karamazov swore he had left with the rest of the gang, and it may have been quite true. No one has ever known for sure. But 5 or 6 months later, the town discovered with shock and horror that Lizaveta was pregnant. Who could possibly be the offender? Then suddenly the rumor spread that it was Fyodor Karamazov. Where did that rumor originate? Of the merry gang of gentlemen, only one was still in town by then, a middle-aged and respectable state councillor, the father of grown-up daughters, who certainly would not have spread such a rumor even if there had been something to it. The other 5 had moved out of our area, but the rumor pointed to Karamazov, persistently so. Karamazov, of course, did not seem bothered by it at all. Had the allegations against him been made only by some local shopkeepers or tradesmen, he would hardly have bothered to acknowledge them. For at that time he was proud and kept company only with gentlemen and civil servants, whom he felt obliged to amuse. This was one of the occasions on which Gregory fiercely defended his master, not only trying to disprove the allegations against him, but openly upbraiding the accusers until he succeeded in making many of them change their minds. Whatever happened to her was her own fault, he claimed with great assurance, and her seducer, he said, was none other than Karp the Wrench, a dangerous escaped convict who at that time was living in hiding in our town. This seemed quite a plausible conjecture, because people remembered Karp well, and especially that around that time in the fall he had been roaming the streets at night and had robbed 3 people. But all these rumors and arguments did not in the least change the general sympathy for the poor holy fool. In fact, the opposite was true. People showed even more kindness and concern for her. Mrs. Kondratiev, a well-to-do merchant's widow, took Lizaveta to her house early in April and tried to keep her there at least until the baby was born. Lizaveta was watched night and day, but on the very last day she managed to slip away, ending up in Fyodor Karamazov's garden. How she managed to get over the tall fence, especially in the last stages of pregnancy, remains a mystery. Some claim that she was helped over it, others that it was a case of levitation. Complicated though it may be, the true explanation probably does not involve any supernatural intervention. Having spent many nights in people's vegetable gardens, Lizaveta had become an expert climber of wattle fences and could conceivably, pregnant as she was, have somehow managed to climb over the tall wood fence and jump down into Fyodor Karamazov's garden, perhaps hurting herself in the process. Gregory rushed back, sent Martha to help Lizaveta, and himself went to fetch an old midwife who, very conveniently, lived nearby. The baby was saved, but Lizaveta died at dawn. Gregory took the baby boy home, told his wife to sit down, put the little boy in her lap, right against her breast, and said to her, "This is a child of God, an orphan. He is everybody's kin, and ours more than anyone else's. Our little departed one has sent us this baby born of the son of the devil and of a holy woman. Feed him and weep no more." And Martha brought up the boy. They christened him Paul and registered his patronymic as Fyodorovich, as a matter of course, without asking anyone's permission. Fyodor Karamazov did not object to this. In fact, he found it rather amusing. And later he called him Smerdyakov, the reeking one, from his mother's nickname, Lizaveta Smerdyashtaya, reeking Lizaveta. And now this name, Smerdyakov, was Karamazov's cook. Now this same Smerdyakov was Karamazov's cook, and at the beginning of our narrative he lived in the servant's cottage with Gregory and Martha. I should really say more about him, but I am ashamed to impose any more stories of common servants on my readers, so I will resume my story, trusting that, as it develops, Smerdyakov will become sufficiently understandable to the reader. And that was Chapter 2 of Book 3 of the Brothers Karamazov by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Please subscribe, share this video, and like, and we'll see you in the next video where I read Chapter 3, The Confession of an Ardent Heart in Verse. Bye.